Jephthah, did you know that a leader of Israel made a promise so risky that it ended up changing the course of his life forever? Jephthah's story is marked by faith, but also by a fatal choice. Before facing the Ammonites, Jephthah made a vow before God. If he won the battle, he would sacrifice the first being that came out of his house to greet him. But what he didn't know was that his own daughter would be the first to come out to greet him. Before continuing with this devastating story, have you subscribed to the channel? Don't miss the next biblical stories as impactful as this one. Now, let's find out what happened when Jephthah returned home and faced the consequences of his vow. The story of Jephthah, described in the book of Judges, is one of the most moving and, at the same time, one of the most tragic in the Old Testament. This man, with a past of rejection and pain, finds himself faced with an opportunity for redemption when the people of Israel, faced with the imminent threat of the Ammonites, call him to be their military leader. Jephthah was the son of a woman who was not the wife of his father, Gilead, and for this reason, he was despised and expelled by his own half-brothers. Without a place in society, he took refuge among misfits and became the leader of a group of marginalized men. His life was marked by pain, but also by unshakable faith and courage. He was not only a man of war, but someone who, despite being rejected by society, sought a greater purpose for his life. When the people of Israel saw in him a chance for victory against their enemies, Jephthah was placed in a position of great responsibility. The vow that Jephthah made before God before the battle with the Ammonites is one of the most impactful moments in this story. Upon learning of the magnitude of the mission, Jephthah made a radical promise. If you will give me victory over the Ammonites, I will sacrifice to the Lord the first thing that comes out of my house to meet me. Judges 11 verses 30 to 31. This vow was made with a fervent heart, with faith that God would help him. But Jephthah did not fully understand the consequences of his words. Driven by the need to win and by faith in God, he did not realize that the sacrifice he was promising would be something far more painful and personal than he could ever have anticipated. When Jephthah returned home victorious, the first person to greet him was not a servant or an animal, but his only child, his beloved daughter, who ran to greet him, unaware that her father had made a vow that would now put her at risk of death. The shock was indescribable, and Jephthah's grief was beyond what any man could bear. He was faced with the weight of his words and the harsh reality that the promise he made to God had to be kept, regardless of the devastating consequences for his own family. This tragedy teaches us profound lessons about the words we speak and the promises we make, especially in times of great need and faith. When Jephthah realized what he had done, pain and suffering filled his heart, but his daughter, in an act of incredible courage and acceptance, not only understood her father's dilemma, but also accepted his vow. She asked for time to grieve her youth and live her final days in freedom, without bitterness, before fulfilling the promise she had made. The story of Jephthah is undoubtedly one of the most moving in the Bible, showing the power of faith, but also warning us of the responsibility of our words and actions. When we make promises to God, we must remember that we cannot foresee the consequences they may bring. Rather than acting impulsively, we should seek divine wisdom to guide us in our choices. The story of Jephthah calls us to reflect deeply on the impact of the promises we make, especially those made under the pressure of great challenges and tribulations. Jephthah won his battle, but he paid a price that, as he himself realized, was not worth it. This tragedy also teaches us about God's character and faithfulness. Even in the face of Jephthah's failure, God heard his prayer and gave him victory. God did not abandon Jephthah, but helped him on his journey. However, the story reminds us that God is faithful, but the consequences of our choices, whether good or bad, fall upon us. Jephthah kept his promise, but at a very high human cost. In the end, Jephthah's daughter was sacrificed, and his life was marked by this tragedy. The Bible does not give us all the details of what happened next, but what we do know is that Jephthah's vow was fulfilled, and the pain he felt at losing his daughter was indescribable. This story serves as a warning to us all. The promises we make to God are serious and carry immense weight. We cannot make promises lightly without thinking about the consequences. When making decisions, we must ask God not only for faith, but also for discernment and wisdom, so that our choices honor Him and do not cause irreparable harm to ourselves and others. Jephthah's story is, therefore, an invitation to reflection. It challenges us to be careful with our words and to deeply consider the promises we make. When we look at Jephthah's suffering, we can understand that although God is faithful and just, the consequences of our decisions can take us to places we never imagined. May we learn to act with wisdom and discernment in all our choices, always seeking to align our decisions with God's will. Thus, like Jephthah, we can face life's challenges with faith, but also with the wisdom that comes from above, so that our promises and words are fulfilled in a way that honors God and brings peace and not suffering. Don't you think? Jephthah's tragedy is not just about his daughter's sacrifice. His story leads us to reflect deeply on what it means to make a vow to God. How can we, with faith, commit to promises that, without due discernment, can have irreversible consequences? Jephthah was a man of faith, but his faith, without wisdom and understanding, led him down a path of pain and loss. His daughter's sacrifice is one of the darkest moments in the Bible and serves as a grim reminder that before we speak, we need to measure the weight of our words and actions. Jephthah, without realizing the implications of his vow, paid a huge price, and this mistake teaches us the importance of considering our words before committing to them. He asked God for something in a moment of anguish, but history shows that we should not make hasty decisions, especially when they involve lives and destinies. What seemed like an act of faith turned out to be a tragedy, and it challenges us to think, are we being wise in the promises we make? But what can we learn from this? What does this story teach us? First, it shows us the power of our words and promises. Jephthah made his vow with a heart full of faith, but without fully understanding the implications of what he was asking. The story of Jephthah also teaches us that our promises must be made wisely. It is easy to make promises to God when we are in need or in moments of great faith, but it is essential that we reflect on the consequences of our words and the effects they can have not only on our lives, but on the lives of others around us. Faith without wisdom can lead us to thoughtless choices, and this is something that Jephthah experienced in the flesh. His story is a warning that we should be cautious when making promises because, as he experienced, one cannot go back once the words are spoken. Jephthah's story is a powerful and painful reminder that our decisions, especially those made in moments of anguish or unshakable faith, carry consequences that may be irreversible. Jephthah was a man of faith, but his faith, when not accompanied by wisdom and discernment, led him to make a vow that would forever change the destiny of his own daughter. His story teaches us that, before making impulsive decisions, we need to stop and reflect on the possible repercussions. Many times, in moments of despair, we make promises to God with the intention of pleasing Him, but without understanding the real weight of these words. Jephthah's vow, apparently made sincerely, shows us that even faith, without proper understanding, can lead us down painful paths. This tragedy is not limited to the death of his daughter, but is a reflection of the lack of reflection on the consequences of the words we speak. Many times, when we feel helpless or in search of something greater, we promise God or make decisions that, at first glance, seem right, but which carry a huge price. Jephthah's story makes us question, are we really aware of the weight of our promises? Are we ready to deal with the consequences of our words? What Jephthah experienced is a warning to all of us. It is easy to promise God in times of distress, but we need to understand that our actions and words have a profound and lasting impact, not only on our lives, but also on the lives of others around us. Jephthah paid the price for his recklessness. But what can we learn from this? How can we apply this lesson to our own lives? Are we being prudent and wise in the decisions we make, both in moments of faith and difficulties? As we reflect on this story, we must also consider that Jephthah was not abandoned by God. God was faithful to Jephthah's promise and gave him victory in the battle against the Ammonites. However, the tragedy that followed reminds us that even when God hears us, the consequences of our choices can be irreversible. It challenges us to rethink our own faith journeys. Are we being careful in our words and commitments? We are considering weighing the possible consequences before acting. Jephthah's life teaches us that no matter how much faith we have, it is essential to act wisely. God guides us to act with discernment, and it is our responsibility to seek not only faith, but also divine wisdom, so that our decisions honor Him and respect those around us. Faith, when not accompanied by wisdom, can lead us to thoughtless actions, and that is precisely what happened to Jephthah. The story of Jephthah, a judge of Israel, is a powerful warning to all of us, reminding us of the impact that our words and promises can have, not only in our lives, but in the lives of those around us. When Jephthah made his vow to God before facing the Ammonites, he did so with genuine faith and a sincere heart, believing that by fulfilling his promise, he would obtain divine help to win the battle. However, as the story teaches us, a lack of discernment in the words we speak can have irreversible consequences. Jephthah, in his desperation and faith, promised to sacrifice the first thing that came out of his house, never imagining that this would result in the sacrifice of his own daughter, a tragedy that could have been avoided with more thought and wisdom. The simple act of making a promise to God should not be taken lightly. Jephthah teaches us that when we commit to something before God, we must do so with discernment, considering the consequences of our words. The weight of a promise is profound, and this applies not only to promises made in prayer, but also to all of our daily words and actions. When we are in moments of distress or emotion, it can be easy to promise something in the name of faith, but true wisdom lies in reflecting on the impact of our decisions. Promises made impulsively can lead us down difficult paths, and Jephthah's story serves as a reminder that the lack of wisdom in our choices can have consequences that will affect not only ourselves, but also those around us. What we can learn from this tragedy is that our words have power, and the simple act of promising something to God must be done with complete discernment, so that we do not pay a higher price than we can bear. The story of Jephthah is not only about a family tragedy, but also about the responsibility we have for our choices. God is faithful and just, but the choices we make are our own. Even when our intentions are good and our promises are made with genuine faith, what really matters is the discernment with which we make our decisions. Faith without wisdom can lead us to situations that could otherwise have been avoided. Jephthah won the battle, but the price he paid was too high. This lesson is one of the most important we can learn. Our decisions affect not only ourselves, but also those around us. Therefore, we need to be extremely cautious and wise when making decisions, especially when we are in moments of great need or faith. We cannot make our promises and commitments to God without reflecting on the implications they may have on our lives and the lives of others. Jephthah teaches us that, in addition to faith, we need discernment so that our choices honor God and lead us to true peace. As we reflect on this story, we are reminded that words have power, and that our promises, even the most sincere ones, can have a lasting impact. We must be careful with what we promise, especially to God, because our choices carry immense weight. Therefore, the story of Jephthah challenges us to be prudent, to seek divine wisdom so that our decisions, whether small or large, lead us according to God's will. When making decisions, we cannot be hasty or impulsive. Each step, each word, each promise must be made with reflection, so that we can walk with security and wisdom, respecting the plans that God has for our lives. By learning from the story of Jephthah, we can improve our ability to discern God's will and to make choices that lead us to a future of peace, wisdom, and harmony with God's will.